Hello and welcome to Sunday. Oh my gosh, this is the chapter that I had I don't know, for a very long time that I've been wanting to get to. So anyway, I hope you guys really like it. Let's see. And then as far as book writing is going, I am now writing the big finale. So I've slowed down massively on doing that because I've thought 15 different ways of having it all happen, and I want to make sure everything's going the way that I want, and so I'm still processing it and moving along. But anyway, it's very exciting. So that means we're getting close to the end of the book. Next week I'll probably finish and have a little talk about beta readers at the end, and so I guess be kind of thinking if that's something you might be interested in, maybe. Okay. Anyway, so last reading, we of course had the exchange of reconciliation. Afterwards, the whole house went back to Jason's new kitchen and new everything room, and just had an amazing time. They had lots of shots, they played darts, they put together a puzzle, they played Pac-Man. It was a wonderful time. So anyway, so they went to sleep, everything's good. This chapter picks up. Chapter 44, Zombie Scramble. I woke up to the blaring of the house alarm. My thoughts were murky, but I had enough presence to realize the alarm had been going off for a few moments. Tyler was getting ready to walk out the door, but when he saw I was awake, he ran back and kissed my cheek. I waited a bit, but I wasn't sure you were going to wake up, he said. I'm going to go downstairs and see what's happening. Either stay here or take a moment to get yourself together. You had a fun night last night, and you need to make sure you're 100% before you go into any sort of combat. He kissed me again and then headed out. I sat up in bed and looked around. I didn't feel like I was going to throw up, but I didn't feel clear-headed either. T, I called. How are we doing? You're at about 73% good, he replied. You can function, but you shouldn't be doing any fighting. The house alarm is going off, I told him, so there's no guarantee of that. Can you speed up my recovery? Certainly, he said happily. Just drink a lot of water over the next few minutes. Thank you, T, I sent back. I stood up and headed towards the bathroom. Suddenly, my heart started racing, and I began shivering like I was outside naked on a frosty morning. I was surprised, but I wasn't alarmed. T had made me shiver like this to get the poison out of my system at the gathering. It had worked then, and it should work now. I checked the time, 3:26 a.m. Good God, that was early. What the hell was going on at this time in the morning? I staggered into the bathroom, peed, and drank some water. I started to head to the closet to get dressed, but I changed my mind and ran back and peed again. I drank more water, peed for a third time, and started heading to the closet again, then realized I needed to do a number 2. Damn, they never show all this prep in the movies. I sat on the pot and shivered as Bermuda wandered in and looked at me with judgment. If you're going to party, you're going to have to pay, he seemed to say. Then he sauntered over and rubbed my leg to let me know, or so I could give him some love. Finally, my intestinals seemed happy, and I left the bathroom and got dressed. Tea stopped my shivering, and although I didn't feel perfect, I did feel a lot better. I ran back to the bathroom for one more round of liquids in, liquids out, and I was ready to go. I raced out of my apartment, down the stairs, and out the front door. There was no moon, so other than the lights in the park, the night was pitch black. My new eyes could still see great in the dark, though, and I could see that Tyler and John were already out beyond the shield. I almost couldn't believe what I was seeing. It looked like we were being attacked by rabid zombies. What the heck? One of the zombies saw me and ran straight at the house, screaming like a banshee. He hit the shield with a meaty smack and staggered back. He quickly recovered and ran at the shield again. Jason! he screamed and pounded on the shield with his fists. How did he know my name? His face was covered in blood, but I took a closer look, and this time I recognized him. It was Oliver from Ken's school. What the heck was he doing here, and why was he acting like this? I took a look at the other zombies, and now I knew what I was looking for. I recognized most of them too. They were all students from Ken's school. Oliver, what the heck are you doing? I yelled at him. I'm sorry, he sobbed. I'm so sorry. I gave my oath. I want to live. Oliver, that doesn't make any sense, I shouted. What happened? I'm oath-bound, he said, like that explained it all. Then he started smashing his face into the shield. His nose broke and blood flew everywhere, but he didn't stop. He started losing teeth next, and it seemed like he was going to kill himself if I didn't do something. So I stepped outside the shield and punched him in the head. I didn't hold back as he needed to be stopped. I was really afraid he was going to bust his own head open and kill himself. He was so rabid, he shook off my first punch and kept going. So I punched him again. That did the trick, and he crumbled to the ground unconscious. This was crazy. I felt like I was in a horror movie as another screaming student ran up and attacked me. It was a smaller woman I'd fought a few hours ago, but this time she was vicious and she didn't hold back. She clawed at me and even bit me at one point. I quickly discovered there was a big difference between fighting a sane person with spells and fists and fighting an insane person who will do anything to tear you apart. In between her screams, she sobbed and told me she was sorry. She had to do this because of the man. I shifted into high gear, kicked her off me, then punched her out too. This was beyond insane. I looked around wildly, but nobody was headed my way at the moment. Instead, they were drawn to John and Tyler, who were in the fight of their lives. It only took a moment, but I could see that both of them were trying to be as gentle as possible with the students. They were fighting to knock them out, not kill them, but the students weren't holding back in any way. They were howling, growling, and acting like they had rabies. This had to stop. I looked around again, as somebody had to be behind all this, and that's when I saw him. Carl was standing in the shadows on the downtown side of the park, taking notes in a little notepad. I think he's testing us, my analytical side said quickly. He's probably noting how quickly the house responded, how many defenders showed up, and how willing we were to get outside the shield. They must be sworn to him, I growled. I believe so, my analytical side replied. Also, these are just the first row mages. He's holding back the better fighters. If he got these guys to swear to him, it makes sense he's taken the whole school. Carl saw me looking at him. He calmly gave me the finger, put his little notepad in his pocket, and turned to leave. Before I'd even thought about what I should do, I was running after him. It was instinct more than anything. This guy was getting intel to hit our house again. I couldn't let him get away. Also, he now controlled all these mages and possibly Ken's whole school. He had to be stopped, just like Victor. Tyler, John, I hollered. There was no way I wanted to face Carl on my own. I was sure I could catch him, but I wanted them there to help bring him down. I got a glance from John, but Tyler had enough of a break in his fight to give me a quick wave. It's Carl, I hollered again and pointed in the direction he was going. Tyler nodded, so I focused all my attention on Carl and picked up speed. He must have heard me coming as he looked over his shoulder and then took off running. He'd been jogging before, but now he really gave it some gas. He was in better shape than I thought he would be, and his long legs ate up the distance. But I was faster than him, and I gradually narrowed the gap between us. I'd almost caught him when he turned and ducked down an alley. It wasn't well lit, but that didn't bother me. He started to slow down, and I thought he was going to turn and fight, but I reached in first and kicked his back leg out from under him. He hit the ground face first, and it would have messed him up for sure, except his shield charm kicked in. It kept the ground away from him, just like it was supposed to, but it had the interesting effect of making him float. There wasn't any friction to stop him, so he shot across the ground and slammed into the wall. His shield was still up, so he bounced off that wall, skimmed across the ground, and bounced off the opposite wall. He looked pissed, but I thought this was wonderful fun, so I kicked him again and kept him going. He started bouncing back and forth between the two walls like he was the puck in air hockey. I don't know how far behind me Tyler and John were, so I needed to keep him entertained for as long as possible. In the meantime, I took the opportunity to make a quick flasher. He wasn't as fully detailed as I liked, but he would do. I sent him way up in the air to shine out our location to my backup squad. I kicked Carl again to keep the air hockey going, but he got smart and shut off his shield charm. I was hoping the charm would run out of juice just as he slammed into a wall, but that didn't happen. Since he shut the charm off himself, he fell into a controlled roll and smoothly bounced back to his feet. I was hoping he'd be rattled and upset. Instead, he seemed pretty calm. "I've caught a little canary," he said in a flat voice. "I'm going to enjoy making you sing for me." The whole thing was just weird. He wasn't acting like a normal person at all. Josette, the lady with the black aura, thought he was a psychopath. I was inclined to agree with her. "What do you mean?" I asked. If he wanted to talk, that was fine with me. "I can only get a limited amount of information from observation," he noted. "It would be much easier for me to ask questions for someone who lives in the house. After I break a few things, you'll be happy to tell me everything you know." While he was chatting, I started putting together a real flasher. I thought I'd have more time, though, as he paused and looked at my light in the sky. "That was smart," he said calmly. "I was hoping to really enjoy myself here, but it looks like I'll have to move quickly." He started summoning his weapons, and I realized the fight was going to happen. Regretfully, I stopped working on my flasher and summoned my battle energy. The flow and stability of water filled my lower half, while the dodge ability of smoke filled my upper half. I took a deep breath and called the lightning as I pigeon-stepped towards him. Carl summoned the same weapons I'd seen him use on Cassandra. He called a baton to his right hand and a ball of energy to his left. I was hoping to hit them before they were fully formed, but he formed his weapons way too quickly. He lashed out with his baton, and I slap-blocked it out of the way. His eyes widened in surprise as I saw a flash of emotion for the first time. He quickly struck again, then again, but I easily blocked it every time. Carl jumped back out of range and then paused. "Little Mouse has learned how to fight," he said. I wasn't sure if he was talking to me or himself. Either way, he seemed to be re-examining me in a whole new light. I was doing the same for him. I realized the last time I'd seen him fight, I'd been completely unfamiliar with mages creating their own weapons. He'd seemed powerful, unstoppable, like a force of nature. Now, I'd seen lots of mages fight with lots of different weapons. I trained a lot with sparkles, and I'd fought tons of battles in the arena on the beach. I'd also had real matches with mages many times my age, and I now had my own shield and battle gauntlets. I wasn't a little mouse anymore. I had experience, and I looked at what Carl was wielding with fresh eyes. His baton was really good. It wasn't at the level of the Craftsman or Sandy Shillelagh's, but it was better than most. His defensive ball was really good too. I was wondering what he was using for detail, but it looked like he looked like he'd made it out of interlocking swirls. If anything, it was even better than the baton, as he wasn't trying to match anything in real life. "Where's his partner?" my analytical side said anxiously. "That's his power source. If Marius is here, he has way more magic than you, and you need to run." That was good thinking. I sent a quick image to my dudes, and they quickly flew around the area, looking for Marius. Nothing. Unfortunately, they also didn't see any sign of John or Tyler. I knew knocking out rabid mages wasn't easy, but how long was it going to take? We just stood there looking at each other, waiting for the other side to make the first move, so I asked the dudes to expand their search radius. If Marius truly wasn't around, then we could just stand here all night. I had backup arriving, and as far as I knew, he didn't. Carl must have realized the same thing as suddenly he attacked. This time he wasn't trying to play with me. He just wanted to club me like a caveman and drag me back to his lair. Unfortunately for him, my pigeon stepping beat his caveman, and his powerful swings came up empty. I dodged, blocked, and deflected all his attacks. I even got in some punches of my own, although I was mainly targeting his arms and weapons. I didn't want to go all out on him, as the last thing I needed was for him to land a lucky blow. The scary thing about him was he didn't seem to be frustrated. Instead, he just tried harder. He made his swings shorter and faster. He tried from different angles, and he even threw in some kicks. The skills Tyler had taught me handled him just fine. When we did clash, Rex and his Hex network dominated his baton. His baton was powerful, but the detail on my soul creations was exceptional. I lost a tiny bit of magic, but he lost a whole lot more. As we fought, I began to realize I could take him. Sure, Carl was tough and brimming with rotten magic, but I was faster and getting the better of him on every exchange. It might take a while, but I could wear him down and punch him out, just like I'd done with Eugene. I switched from dodging and deflecting to hard blocking. He was mainly attacking with his baton, and my change in tactics started making it shower sparks every time we clashed. It looked pretty, and it wasted his power too. I also hard blocked his arm and forearms too, and he took a brief second to summon a personal shield. I'll say this for him, he got it up faster than anyone I'd seen at the tournament. He attacked me again, and I started picking up speed. I still felt sluggish from the shots from the night before, but this activity was certainly helping to clear my head. I threw more punches in with the blocks and started to take the fight to him. I didn't go crazy and try for any body blows yet. Instead, I focused on his forearms and his weapons. I worked the angles and destroyed his shield. But as fast as I tore it apart, he put it back together. Some of that damage was getting through, though, and the grip on his baton grew weaker. Finally, I saw my chance. I grabbed his baton and ripped it away from him. I felt a moment of triumph, as I had just made him waste all that magic, and I expected him to be surprised or upset. Instead, he just continued to look calm and collected. Without missing a beat, he switched to his other weapon and slung its defensive ball at me. I guess he thought he'd surprise me with its ranged ability, but I'd already seen him use this in his fight with Cassandra. I just stepped out of its path, let his ball fly right on by, and then I grabbed the cord that tethered it to him. He'd made his ball like a yo-yo, and the string of magic that connected it to him seemed small and fragile. Red, I called, and he went to work. His hex network dissipated the magic, just like it had when I was cutting through the Loggerell's hedges. With the cord cut, his ball of magic didn't return to him. Instead, it flew on down the alley, losing cohesion the whole way. By the time it reached the street, it was just magic vapor that gradually dissipated in the air. I felt triumphant again, but I realized I'd lost focus as Carl turned and sprinted out of the alley. Damn, he was quick. Not only was he quick on his feet, he was reacting quicker to the flow of the fight. He didn't seem to be experiencing the normal emotional highs and lows, and as a result, he could change his strategy at the drop of a hat. I made a mental note to be aware of that as I chased him down and smashed his evil face into the ground. By reacting so quickly, he'd gained a bit of a head start, but I was still faster on my feet. It took a couple of blocks, but I caught up to him again. He tried to weave and dodge, but I was lighter, so that worked out more to my advantage than his. I kicked his feet out from under him again, but he switched on his shield charm before he hit the ground. Once again, he slid down the dark street like a hockey puck. Puck. But this time, I stayed on him. He switched off his shield charm and rolled to his feet, only for me to be right there, punching him. I didn't get to land a solid blow as he jumped into the air and used his magic to push off of me. The move was fantastic for him, as it not only pushed me back, it also made him fly through the air. He landed about 3 car lengths away, turned, and took off running again. Wow, Carl had some moves. I tore after him again, and this time I really gave it everything I had. I didn't want our chase to take me too far away from the house. My flasher was still in the air above, providing a beacon for Tyler and John to find us. As I got close to Carl again, I could hear him panting for air. This chase was certainly wearing him down, while it was just clearing my head, and I was feeling better. I'd almost caught him when he glued my shoes to the ground. It was the same spell Isabel had used in the Battle of the Park to stop me when I'd been running away from her golem. The difference this time was my shoes weren't on as tight, so instead of being bent in half and ruining my legs, I popped right out of my shoes and face planted on the asphalt. Now it was my turn to slide down the road and crash into a parked car. Thank goodness it was the middle of the night and there wasn't any traffic, or I might have been run over. I lay there for a moment, stunned, before staggering to my feet. I expected to be badly skinned up with blood everywhere, but to my surprise, it looked like my shield had kicked in and kept me in one piece. Unfortunately, I couldn't say the same thing about my clothes. The asphalt and grit on the road had torn them to shreds. Crap. Another set of clothes ruined. I needed clothes made out of Kevlar. Oh well, this wasn't the first time I'd run around naked at night. At least there wasn't anyone around to see my bare ass racing away. Still, thank goodness for Red and his team. Sliding down the road on my face was not one of my top 10 things to do. I looked around, expecting Carl to be far ahead of me or even out of sight. Instead, he was only about a block and a half away. His once graceful run was now in shambles, and he was holding his side like he was in pain. I shook my head to clear it and took off after him. I couldn't run as fast with bare feet, but I was still faster than him. He ducked down another alley, and I had to slow down a lot. There was glass, trash, and rocks everywhere. "Dudes," I called, "clear me a path." And that's exactly what they did. They could only move small objects, but it was enough to get the glass and rocks out of the way, and I picked up speed again. I could hear Carl ahead of me, wheezing like a freight train. I caught up to him outside a small warehouse, and he spun to face me. He summoned his shield and weapons again, but he was tired, and he wasn't moving quickly anymore. I flowed around his weak strikes and began punching the shit out of him. I punched his arms, his side, his head, anywhere I could reach him. His shield fell, recovered, and fell again. The second time it fell, I got a solid body shot in, and I felt it break something. He got his shield back up, but then it flickered on his baton arm, and I was fast enough to break that too. For the first time, I saw emotion from him as he screamed in rage. His magic picked me up and flung me through the air. I hit the other wall of the alley and fell to the ground. Once again, I was shaken, but I wasn't hurt. Carl used his remaining good arm to open the door of the warehouse, and he staggered inside. I got to my feet, got my breath back, and started across the alley after him. That's when I realized I knew this place. This was the warehouse where we'd rescued Sandy and fought Isabel. Had Carl been hiding here the whole time? Carl was worn out, hurt, low on magic. If I could just hit him a few more times, this whole thing would be over. Our house wouldn't be in danger anymore, and Ken's school would be saved. Of course, this was also a place he was familiar with, so he might have set up traps or other defenses. The last time I'd been here, it had just been a simple warehouse, so maybe he was looking for a place to hide. Still, a little caution couldn't hurt. I was pretty sure Carl couldn't hide from me, but I didn't want to give him time to recover either. I needed to be quick. but careful. Surfers, scout the building, I called. Look for traps, weapons, people, or anything like that. They zoomed down and started to go through the half-open door, but there was some sort of ward on the building. I felt it with my hand, but it was easy to push through. It didn't seem to be any sort of shield to stop someone from entering. Instead, it felt like a barrier to contain magic. That made sense, as Isabel had used this place before. Even mundanes can sense magic to a small degree, and she probably didn't want her bad vibes leaking into the neighborhood. Or maybe Carla set it up so other mages couldn't find him. Either way, it was fairly harmless and easy to bypass. Go through my body and out my hand, I told my surfers. That will get you through the shield. They did that and then zoomed through the warehouse, looking for traps. Nothing. I checked the sky. My flasher was still shining brightly for Tyler and John to see. It was like the Bethlehem star, only really not like that at all. It had said, "Here be hope and joy to the world." My little star said, "Here be the lair of an asshole. Come ye merry gentlemen and lay some smackdown." The coast was clear, so I stepped through the ward and quickly moved to the side. The place was dark as a tomb, with only a tiny bit of light coming from the doorway. I moved even farther to the side so I wouldn't be backlit against the door as I moved through the space. My dark eyesight kicked in, and the warehouse lit up in shades of gray. It wasn't as good as it would have been with real light, but it was pretty close. The space seemed empty, but I took time for a second look. At one point, our house had battled for its existence here. Now it just seemed abandoned and a little eerie. The circle that had contained Sandy was still etched in the floor. The concrete was still broken where John had finally caught Isabel and smashed her into the ground. The roof still had a hole in it where Isabel's body had blasted into the sky, although now it had a tarp over it to keep out the rain. There was a door in the far wall that stood ajar. I could hear faint sounds of movement coming from that direction, so I figured that's where Carl had gone. "Scout it," I directed my surfers as I quickly but carefully crossed the empty warehouse. The door led to another section of the building that was obviously a lot older. The warehouse I'd just come from had steel beams, insulation, and modern finishes. This place had thick wood and old timbers. A brass plaque proudly stated that this used to be a small warehouse during Prohibition times. Now it held a desk and a few filing cabinets. There was a secret door across the room that had probably been well hidden back in the 1920s, but it wasn't very secret now, especially since I could see light around the edges. My surfers had already scouted the office, flown through the cracks, and was now scouting the other side. They'd already relayed back that behind the door were steps leading down into a tunnel. It led into a large room that looked like it had been part of a cave. That made sense, as Louisville was built on a network of caves and had one of the largest underground storage areas in the world. It's so big they even had a freaking zip line in it. Some enterprising person had probably found this small cave, built a warehouse over it, added a secret entrance, and then made a lot of money selling a safe place to have a sip of bourbon. Lovely history aside, it now appeared to be the lair for a rotten mage. The surfers reported he was the only person in the space, and there were no other exits to be seen. The floor had some sort of magic circle in it, and there were a few other objects of power, but otherwise there didn't seem to be any traps. I carefully crossed the office, opened the secret door, and stepped through. There was actually a lot of room on the other side. The steps leading down were shallow and wide. I guess that made sense, as they had to get large bourbon barrels in and out of this place. The steps went down further than I expected before the tunnel turned to the left. Once again, it was bigger than I expected. Even John wouldn't have trouble moving through here. The place was well lit, with bare light bulbs fixed to the rocky ceiling. I could hear the sounds of movement, so I crept down the tunnel and carefully stepped into the underground room. It might have been a bar and a warehouse at some point, but it really wasn't that big. Most of the walls and ceiling had the texture like a cave. The floor, however, looked smooth and flat, like it had been ground down and leveled out at one point. Part of one of the walls looked to be man-made, so that made me think the cave continued on further, but someone had blocked it off. There was a circle about 3 foot wide in the middle of the room, with runes and logical connections to it. It was etched into the floor, and it seemed like an open-faced charm. I recognized the design, as it was similar to the one I'd broken into to free Sandy. The surfers hadn't reported this, but there were crates stacked everywhere, and there was a folded cot to one side. I saw empty food bags and empty cans of food. Someone had clearly been eating and sleeping here. I saw empty fast food bags and empty cans of food. Someone had clearly been eating and sleeping here. I paused for a brief sec and took it all in. I scanned everything with my magic sight and then scanned it again. This was Carl's place, and I wanted to make sure he didn't have any surprises. Other than the circle on the floor and Carl himself, nothing seemed dangerous or out of the ordinary. It had taken a couple seconds, but it was well worth it in my opinion. Carl was to my right, bent over a crate, searching through it with his unbroken arm. He was still breathing hard and heavily favoring his right side and arm. Whatever he was looking for, he wasn't going to have time to find it. I resummoned my battle energies, water, smoke, and lightning, settled into my pigeon stance, and stepped towards him. There was no need to issue threats or berate him for what he had done. There wasn't any need to talk to him at all. I just needed to close the distance between us and punch him out before he came up with any tricks to stop me or escape. I wasn't making any noise, so he must have felt me somehow, as he stopped rooting around in the crate and spun to face me. He held up his left hand and opened it. Resting on his palm were 2 steel balls, about the size of golf balls, and they were etched with what looked to be runes. They both glowed with power. Not a huge amount of power, but enough to set my teeth on edge. I hadn't stopped moving towards him, and we were close. I planned to step at an angle in case he launched the balls at me, and then step in from the side. That would put him in punching range, and I could end this fight. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. The 2 metal spheres levitated off his hand and accelerated toward my chest at an amazing rate. I was able to partially dodge, and if they had been regular spears, they would have hit a glancing blow and just sailed right on by. These weren't regular spheres, though. These suckers curved in the air and slammed into the middle of my chest, knocking me back several feet. Thank goodness I had red in the hex network for my shield. Otherwise, they probably would have broken something. The spears split up. One went left, the other went right. They got about 6 feet away, reversed directions, and slammed into me again. Over the next several moments, I got a painful lesson in just how much I still had to learn about fighting. Sure, I was good at punching and blocking a human, but these weren't human. These steel balls had no arms, so it was almost impossible to block them like a regular punch. They weren't limited by human physics, so they could attack from any angle and target any part of my body. They could shoot along the floor and smash into my ankle, or fly it from the ground and try to shatter my chin. They were from hell, and I got my ass handed to me. The only thing that saved me was my new shield. It deflected the balls and slowed them down. When they did hit, the hex network spread the force over a larger area, saving me from broken bones and deep bruising. The fight went from bad to worse when the balls hit me on the side and spun me around like a top. My magic sight was great, but it made me very susceptible to vertigo, and suddenly the floor was heaving and buckling like I was on a boat at high sea. I staggered around the room, crashing into crates as the steel spheres crashed into me. I didn't have a plan. I was just surviving, and I wasn't sure how I was going to keep doing that until I got lucky. Somehow, I staggered into Carl and threw up all over him. Even as a psychopath, the ick factor must have been off the charts, as the balls stopped crashing into me for a moment. That gave my analytical side enough time to come up with a plan. Grab onto him, he commanded quickly. He's controlling the spheres, so if you're close to him, that limits the angles they can come from. Even in my shaken state, that sounded like a good idea, so I grabbed Carl, wrapped myself around him, and held on for dear life. Somehow, I'd forgotten he had broken bones until he screamed in agony. OMG, I could hurt this asshole by grappling with him. Punching had been my major weapon for so long, I'd forgotten there was other ways to attack. I squeezed him hard, rubbing his broken ribs together as we fell to the ground. I managed to roll so I was on the bottom, which limited how the steel spheres could hit me even more. Carl screamed even louder and activated what was left of his shield charm. That didn't work well for him, as it just covered the both of us. The spheres smacked into his own shield and ran out the juice on his own shield charm. The spears were erratic now, as he was having a hard time controlling them, trying to shake me and deal with his pain. Having thrown up, I was feeling better, so I smashed his ribs, pulled his broken arm, and waited for my chance. He was in such bad shape, there was a moment where the steel balls smacked into him rather than me. After that, they just floated in the air, not moving. This was my moment. I pushed him off of me, lunged for them, and wrapped myself around them. "Red, drain the magic out of them," I cried, and he went to work. My body flared with light as the magic they contained was distributed around the hex network and safely vented. "No!" Carl screamed as he realized what was going on. He threw more of his magic into the balls and tried to levitate them away from me. I just hung on and drained his magic. Then he tried to force the two balls apart, probably hoping I could only hold on to one of them. I felt like I was being ripped apart, but I stubbornly kept a hold of both. He threw everything he had into the balls, but it was no use. Red kept taking their magic until finally there wasn't anything more to take. The light faded out as they just became regular, round pieces of steel with weird etching on them. I unwrapped myself and let them fall to the ground. Carl's weapon was dead. Now, it was time to take care of Carl. I looked around the room and realized Carl still hadn't given up. Somehow he'd gotten to his feet and was now staggering towards the tunnel. If he wasn't my enemy, I'd have to respect that level of tenacity. As it was, I just wanted him to give up and die. I staggered to my feet too and went after him. The room still swayed a bit, but I wasn't throwing up, and at least I could move in the right direction. I caught him at the entrance to the tunnel. I grabbed his arm, hauled him around, and punched his face. I was hoping it would knock him out, but I was in crappy shape myself, and my battle energy was all messed up. I didn't have to be fancy or efficient, though. I just needed to get the job done. If I couldn't knock him out with one blow, I'd just keep hitting him until he was out. I hit him with my left fist, then my right, then my left again. Sparkles would have laughed at these punches, but Ken's face wasn't laughing at all. Instead, the room swayed, I punched, and a few hits later I felt something give. I was almost there. Which is why I cried when a torrent of magic as thick as my leg shot down the tunnel and connected to his chest. Oh fuck, my analytical side quivered. Marius must be here. In a blink, his personal shield was back, and this time it was as thick as a mattress. Getting through that was going to be impossible. His jaw hung at a weird angle, and one eye was swollen shut. The other eye, however, glared at me with pure hatred. "Schlei!" he slurred as a thick ribbon of force slammed into me, picked me up, and pinned me against the back wall. I thought that was it, but even then my soul creations were protecting me. The Hex network took all that power, distributed it across my entire body, and vented it out as light and sound. I shone like the sun as a clear, bell-like sound filled the room. I might get out of this after all. Daij! Carl slurred again as his magic changed. Deep breath, my analytical side commanded urgently. Do what? I didn't understand, but I did it anyway. Suddenly I was falling, and I splashed into what seemed to be water. That didn't make any sense. There wasn't any water in the room. The rope of energy followed me, pushing me under. Was he trying to drown me? That would really suck, as my body still needed air. I was trying to figure out if I should struggle or conserve my oxygen for a better moment when the force pushing me under suddenly withdrew. Good. Time to head to the surface. I started to rotate and kick upward when the water left too. Only it didn't exactly leave. It just converted back into stone again. I froze. I couldn't move. It took my mind a moment to catch up. What had just happened was too sudden, too quick. The implication was unthinkable. There was no way this could be happening, and yet somehow this was real. I was buried alive. And this ends our chapter. And I will see you next Sunday. Have a great week.